Pulling out of Chicago's Union Station, Amtrak's Califoria Zephyr leaves one of America's largest cities to cross its widest empty spaces to end in San Francisco 3 days later. Imagine the excitement of someone who's never seen the West, anticipating the adventure and the unique landscape that lies ahead. It's this romance with the West that gave birth to the Califoria Zephyr, a premier train running on the tracks of 3 different railroads. We see another Amtrak train waiting at an old Chicago warehouse, reminding us that Chicago is the hub from which nearly all the long-distance trains depart. We cross the Chicago River and encounter factories that once made Chicago the second largest city in the United States. I'm reminded that Chicago got its start as a meatpacking center, later expanding into other industries. Parallel bridges cross streets and rails as we leave the city behind and enter the countryside on the way to Omaha, Nebraska. Soon we cross the Mississippi River. Even this far north, the Mississippi is wide. The historic Califoria Zephyr was operated here by the railroad that would become the Burlington Northern, the first of 3 to proudly carry the Califoria Zephyr. For the traveler exploring the West, the Mississippi River is a boundary between the industrial settled East and the great beyond. Now we speed through the flat Great Plains of Iowa and Nebraska. This was a section of the Transcontinental Railroad where the Union Pacific set and broke world records of laying rails toward the West Coast, receiving a square mile of land for every mile of track constructed. The Union Pacific kept the route as straight as possible, competing with the Central Pacific Railroad to build the greatest length of track. The Califoria Zephyr took a different route, heading for Denver, where the Rio Grande Railroad would take the Califoria Zephyr through its Rocky Mountain wonderland. The first light of day greets the Califoria Zephyr at Denver. This is where the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad took the Zephyr through its second section. Denver is the largest city in the region. Its humble beginnings of a few ranches was quickly eclipsed by the silver and other hard rock mining in the area. This activity gave Denver and the railroad its birth. The Rio Grande Railroad built its Rocky Mountain empire to compete with Union Pacific and Southern Pacific for freight and passenger traffic to the West Coast. The Califoria Zephyr dips deep into southern Utah, then back north to Salt Lake City. Pulling out of Denver, we climb steadily, rising above the Great Plains and approaching the Rocky Mountains. For those traveling west for the first time, the familiar views of home are a thing of the past. Those expecting rugged country and uncrowded spaces are not disappointed. The Califoria Zephyr has already taken them into the West. Here we enter one of many tunnels along the route. Soon, westbound passengers find themselves at the roof of North America. This snow-dusted wonderland features the Colorado River, not far from its headwaters in Rocky Mountain National Park. The Colorado River will now be the Zephyr's companion through numerous scenic canyons. Looking out through the large viewing car windows, many of the iconic Old West scenes present themselves, and the imagination is free to wander through this still wild country. From the privacy of a roomette in the sleeping car, this jaw-dropping scenery can be enjoyed in quiet. There are many areas of the train where passengers can get a great view of the scenery. This view is from the dining car. The coach has large windows. The viewing car has wraparound windows near the ceiling, where passengers can look up and see the many cliffs and gorge walls along this route. Across the river, we see a section of Interstate 70, one of the last major parts of the interstate system to be completed. Like the railroad, the highway depends on tunnels to carry traffic through this mountainous country. There's something about these soaring, craggy walls that sets my imagination on fire. I'm not alone in this. The Califoria Zephyr's schedule is timed to pass here during the daylight. Where else can you see a sight like this while deciding what to eat for lunch?
Okay.
I wasn't sure if you knew what you wanted.
I think I'll get the Angus burger again.
I was thinking about having the burger too.
Do you work for Amtrak?
No, I'm a big fan though.
Oh, you are?
As you can tell.
Yeah.
Being mistaken for an Amtrak employee was an honor. After hours of drop-dead scenery, the Califoria Zephyr arrives in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. Glenwood Springs is the gateway to the ski area of Vail. It's a good place to get off and spend a night or two. After a brief look downstream, my wife and I crossed over Interstate 70 and the river to our hotel. Glenwood Springs is named for the naturally occurring hot springs here. Our hotel, the Hotel Colorado, is very much a part of today's hot springs experience, providing spacious pools for guests to soak in the hot spring water, plus a water slide for those wanting a little more action. The Hotel Colorado is one of those grand hotels with years of serving guests, so I was surprised that they offered rooms affordable to working people like us. We even saw a quilt commemorating its 100th anniversary. But we didn't spend much of our time in the hotel. There's too much to do outside, so we explored a bit of the Roaring Fork River Trail, the Colorado River, and the railroad itself. The Roaring Forks River has trails where the Rio Grande Railroad used to connect. The Colorado River hosted life for us to enjoy, and the railroad featured a small switching yard. From here, we saw this coal train rumble through town. Crossing the west, I was astounded by how much coal is being mined and shipped around the country. In 2008, the merger of Union Pacific and Southern Pacific was still evident. The Southern Pacific's bloody nose locomotive with Union Pacific lettering. During our 2008 trip, this was the first freight train to emerge from Glenwood Canyon, where a landslide had stopped the train that would have carried us west. This landslide gave us another day in Glenwood Springs. The waiting room at the station was practically deserted as we waited for hours for our train to get through and pick us up. Then it filled with eastbound passengers who couldn't go any further.
What's that? Pretty good, I think.
We booked on the next day's train and got a decent night's sleep across from the station at this hotel. The following day, the eastbound Califoria Zephyr pulled in and waited, but then went through, much to our relief. Next came the announcement we were waiting for.
As you leave the station, please look around, make sure you have all of your personal belongings. And for your safety, please remain well behind the yellow line until the train comes to a complete stop.
And here it came, the westbound Califoria Zephyr. We joined the horde of stranded passengers boarding for the trip west.
Folks, you need to come to me right here. There, he'll assign you to me. One more.
We looked out at the small city we enjoyed, but glad to be on our way.
Crossing the Roaring Fork River. They call this the Roaring Fork River Valley. This is el Rio Colorado. This is the Colorado River.
Here we learned that the horizontal band without snow on these mountains is where a fire burns uncontrolled in a coal mine. If our first-time traveler to the west wanted to see a ranch, well, here's one of many Colorado ranches to be seen from the train. If someone wanted to get a good sight of the West, they would probably feel more than happy with what the California Zephyr has shown them. But wait, there's even more great scenery ahead. The California Zephyr continues following the Colorado River. Now it enters another mountainous area. Here, the rain that fell the previous night has carried with it some sediment. This helps the Colorado River turn its namesake color. Speaking of color, this is Ruby Canyon, one of the most scenic and memorable sections of the California Zephyr route, named for this enchanting red rock. Here we see layer after layer of sedimentary rock. If you wanted to fish for prehistoric fossils, this would be the place to do it. This region was once an inland sea, depositing layers of sediment where fossilized sea life is found. The train passes Cisco, once a booming town that's all but become a ghost town today.
Cisco is a remnant of a uranium mining boom town. There were no mines or mills here. There was only a supply point for the prospectors. It hung on after the short-lived uranium boom as a rest stop on the old Highway 50.
The splashes of red color now shift from the rocks to the sky. Another day of incredibly beautiful landscape comes to an end, and we're still moving west. We woke up in Nevada, having rumbled through Salt Lake City during the wee hours of darkness. The section from Salt Lake City to San Francisco was the last for the California Zephyr, and was carried out by Western Pacific Railroad through its Feather River Canyon route. Today, the California Zephyr uses the Union Pacific tracks on the old Transcontinental Railroad. These tracks pass very close to this power plant. The tall smokestacks are familiar enough, but this one has some kind of dome. With so many passengers rebooked because of the landslide, coach passengers were reminded not to sprawl out into neighboring seats.
We're going to fill most of those up in Truckee an hour later. So this train will be completely full. It is officially sold out. So please occupy only the seat for which you are taking a seat check.
The previous day's storm had left a heavy blanket of snow. Climbing back into the Sierra Nevada mountains, we found it slow going. Amtrak was not the only ones trying to make up for the landslide delay. Heavy freight traffic made an on-time arrival look doubtful. We crept by this ski area, the beneficiary of the heavy snow that preceded us. The Califoria Zephyr is one of the ways to get up to a ski area like this. It's a popular form of transportation for skiers in California. And here we could see the mounds of snow that piled up in the mountains. The Califoria Zephyr offers a breathtaking view of Donner Lake, named for a party of Oregon-California Trail pioneers who got trapped at Donner Pass by heavy snow. After eating down all their supplies, the group reverted to cannibalism before they were rescued. A later rescue occurred here in 1952. Southern Pacific's City of San Francisco train was stranded for 3 days at Donner Pass. Snow removal equipment was frozen to the rails and couldn't be used. Rescue parties had to dig their way to the train on State Highway. No one died at that time. Continuing west, the Califoria Zephyr drops below snow level on its way to Sacramento. Here we see the double track crossing the high trestle over Interstate 80. A volunteer from the Sacramento Railroad Museum told us passengers about the building of the Transcontinental Railroad.
The labor shortage became severe. On a trial basis, 50 Chinese were hired as laborers. They proved to be incredible workers. They were quick to learn, efficient, very patient, and peaceful.
Approaching Sacramento, the Califoria Zephyr passes through the expansive Roseville train yard.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we leave the Roseville station, to the left of the train are the massive freight yards of the Union Pacific Railroad here in Roseville.
The Pacific Fruit Express expanded its ice supply facility here for refrigerator cars. By 1920, this was the largest ice-making plant in the United States. With the advent of the mechanical refrigerator car, the facility was converted for the rebuilding and repair of thousands of freight cars then owned by the Southern Pacific Railroad. At one time, this was the largest repair facility for railroad locomotives in California and one of the largest rail yards west of Chicago. Overhauled by Union Pacific, this yard on the left of the train was renovated after the merger.
Entering Sacramento, the tracks are lined with camps of homeless people. They flocked to tolerant Sacramento and left piles of garbage along the railroad tracks.
Is the California State Railroad Museum. The Railroad Museum is the largest and finest interpretive railroad museum in the world. It covers 2.5 acres under one roof and houses over 30 pieces of historic railroad rolling stock. The museum is open daily except Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's days from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m.
American River that
Excuse me, American River.
crossing over this time going into the Sacramento station.
The Transcontinental Railroad only went west as far as Sacramento. The section from here to San Francisco was added soon after the Golden Spike ceremony in Promontory, Utah. At one time, Southern Pacific passengers boarded a ferry for the trip across the bay to San Francisco.
Or train will be on the track, next track stops over in Sioux City, Richmond, Berkeley, Hayward, Fremont, Santa Clara, San Jose. Or you may alight from the train and alight at one of those cigarettes. We will be at this Sacramento station approximately 10 to 15 minutes here at Sacramento. Sacramento is our present station stop, Sacramento, California.
By the time we pull out, we're pretty travel weary.
That existed when I lived down here, or just wasn't aware of it.
To old Sacramento.
The Califoria Zephyr crosses the Sacramento River, traveling west of the original Transcontinental Railroad. As the train services shut down, we view the Sacramento River, which has its headwaters at Mount Shasta, not far from Southern Oregon, where we live. The actual train doesn't cross the bay into San Francisco. Passengers are bused into the city from Emeryville, the last station of the Califoria Zephyr. Leaving Sacramento, we started gathering our belongings. We're getting off at Martinez. We cross a large bridge here, looking out at surplus Navy ships anchored here since the end of World War II. The train is heading for Emeryville, where passengers will be bused across the bay to San Francisco. We're content to get off here at Martinez. For us, this was the end of the line. This wasn't my first time traveling through the Old West, but it was still an adventure for my wife Liz and me. It would take some time to process all we had done and seen on the Califoria Zephyr. After reflecting on these fond memories, we'd start planning our next Amtrak adventure. See you on the rails.